Hey, Garage Logic fans, I do a podcast on the Garage Logic Network that comes out every Wednesday and Friday now, twice a week. But here's an important caveat. There is zero logic available in my show, in the formal definition of logic. Of course, life is a yin and yang kind of thing. There's the logic side, and then there's the what the hell side, which needs to get its exercise. So come for the what the hell and stay for the you've got to be kidding me. MISCHKE, now Wednesdays and Fridays, twice a week.
Don't miss the season's biggest and best rummage sale Saturday, September 13th and Sunday, September 14th at the Shoreview Arena, Highway 96 in Victoria. Saturday early bird admission 7 to 9 a.m. is $5, and after that, it's free. Unbelievable deals, and many items go for half price on Sunday. Go both days. There's lots of furniture and a special collection of our favorite things featuring the best of the sale. Art, children's and teens clothing, upscale clothing, boutique and beautiful jewelry, books, toys, bikes, holiday decor and craft supplies, electronics, household items, sporting goods, luggage, tools, gardening, pet items, shoes and purses, and so much more. Proceeds from the sale benefit Children's Hospital Association, helping patients and families at Children's Minnesota. More information at northoaksrummagesale.org. That's Saturday, September 13th from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. and Sunday, September 14th from 9 to 2 p.m. at the Shoreview Arena, Highway 96 and Victoria.
Hello, listener. You're a listener. How did you become one of those? In the womb, I imagine, those little ears developed. My name's MISCHKE. I think during the ultrasound, someone said to your mother, "Oh, that one's going to be a listener. Yes, look at the little ears." Oh, quite a listener that one will be. Welcome to the show, listeners. I think I'd like to call a listener someone who had an ear developed in the womb. I wonder if when people are very little, they have ambitions of becoming listeners when they grow up. Let's call a listener.
Hello.
Well, Tamar, hello. Are you hearing me okay?
Oh, this is MISCHKE.
Ha ha! Oh, you win.
Give me a second.
You get a copy of the home game. I'm sending it to you. What am I catching you doing?
I'm a speech-language pathologist, and so this is week 1 for me actually seeing kids, and I was just working on my schedule and doing that lovely paperwork, the bit of my job I actually hate. So, yeah, that's what I'm up to.
Well, I'm just curious, speech-wise, how am I doing right now?
Well, you've got the Midwestern Minnesota twang, but I'm good with that. It's dialectal, so I'm not going to change it. No, you're good, and you're a great storyteller. So you got it going on. And I could recognize your voice. It took me a second.
No one's ever said this to me before. You say I got a Midwestern twang.
Yeah, well, it's that nasal Minnesotan, the round O and a little bit through your nose, nasal. I lived in the South for about 37 years, and so they have a very different dialect there. But yeah, depending on what part of the country, you hear things different ways.
Did you say to me it's diabolical, so I'm not going to change it?
Well, it's that too, but I said dialectal.
Oh,
There's a
dialectal.
difference, but sometimes that dialect can be diabolical too, so depends.
And when you say dialectal, you mean it's just...
It is influenced by where you live and who you hear.
I don't suppose you ever caught the movie Miracle with Kurt Russell in the role of Herb Brooks. Now,
Much different than Mel Brooks.
I don't know that we'd have beat the Soviets with Mel, but we sure would have had some fun. Actually, that would be lovely to redo the movie Miracle in a Mel Brooks style.
That would be actually pretty funny.
But if you get a chance, put in Herb Brooks' speech from the movie Miracle into YouTube. Just listen for a couple minutes. Now, I don't know what the heck's happening here, but they're trying to make him sound like a Minnesotan. They're trying to make Kurt Russell sound like a Minnesotan. And he sounds like Dan Aykroyd doing a bit from SNL.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you've earned here tonight.
Now, wait a minute. Is that how we speak, or was that a bit of an exaggeration?
They do exaggerate it to some degree.
Are there still as many stutterers as ever?
There actually are. I went to a 3-day conference this summer on stuttering specifically. It was amazing. The concept of how you treat people who stutter is evolving. That's the best way to describe it. People have a misconception, I think. It's not infrequent for kids to go through periods anywhere from a week to 3-4 months of what we would call developmental stuttering, where all of a sudden they start stuttering, and it can freak a parent out. But that's developmental stuttering, and a lot of times they just grow right out of it. But then you have some children who it's part of your DNA. It's part of who you are. There are some genetic components to it. Once you're a stutterer, you never outgrow it.
But you just said some kids do grow out of it.
That's a different kind of stuttering. It's not true stuttering. Developmental stuttering would be the kind that they grow out of it. And so it's not true stuttering. Someone who is a true person who stutters, they don't grow out of it. And what the shift has become, a lot of people for the longest time, it was, I need that magic pill that will make me stop stuttering. I need those strategies that will help me so that I can be quote unquote fixed so I won't stutter. You never outgrow it. It's part of who you are. So the way it's shifted, the whole mindset of how to treat a person who stutters has shifted to making people comfortable in their stuttering skin.
I did a show one time with a guy who stuttered, and I wanted to talk about stuttering with him. And whenever I talked to people about this show that I was doing on stuttering, to a man or woman, people said, oh, I thought we fixed stuttering. I thought stuttering was something from when we were kids. I thought stuttering was something from the 70s or 80s. There aren't stutterers anymore. It was astounding to me how many people thought stuttering was this old-fashioned thing that used to exist. Now, for the number of people who said that to me, to say that to me, there had to be some message they got somehow. And I'm wondering what message they got, or was it that they just didn't run into stutterers anymore? Now, I do remember when I was growing up running into far more people who stuttered than I do now.
No, we still have plenty of people who stutter, but there have been a lot of people who learned how to mask it. Once you're a true stutterer, you're always a stutterer. So there's a lot of actors and actresses, and I'm drawing the blank on the name. She's real pretty. She played the new Mary Poppins, married to the guy from The Office. She is a person who stutters, but you wouldn't know it hearing her act.
Emily Blunt.
Yes, Emily Blunt.
So
That's
Emily
right.
Blunt had a debilitating stutter, which she considered a neurological condition during her childhood. And she discovered that acting, by allowing her to pretend to be someone else and use different accents, gave her the confidence to speak fluently. She did state that once you've had a stutter, you're always a stutterer, and it can come and go. She described the condition as an imposter living in your body.
I had forgotten she had said that. She was featured in one of the Stuttering Foundation magazines. They put out a magazine, and they feature famous people on the cover, and she was one of them in her Mary Poppins getup. There's lots of strategies that people have learned to mask it or to control it so that they control the stutter. It doesn't control them. And I think as a person gets older into their adulthood, they are more likely to use those strategies because they don't want to be, quote unquote, outed as a person who stutters a lot of times. And when they were younger, they may have had parents that were really hard on them saying, stop that, slow down, just spit it out. Those are very common things. I do a lot of parent education with the parents of my kids who stutter to try to help them understand those statements are hurtful. They're not helpful. And you need to give them as much time as they want to say what they want to say. And if they are having a moment where they're really stuttering, you can say, hey, I got as much time as you need to think about what you want to say. Because sometimes it's a planning thing. They're having to think about what they want to say, how they want to say it. And they may be trying to think of words they want to avoid because they always stutter on certain sounds or more likely to stutter on certain sounds. And so they're doing circumlocution. There's a lot of brain work going on. And so some of these people that are like, oh, we don't have stuttering. That's not a problem anymore. It really is. It still is. It's just going to be something that's with us. I think of a man that goes to my church, and he is a prolific person who stutters. And I have to put on my poker face when I'm talking with him because he just lets it go, and it can be painful to listen to sometimes. But you just have to give him time and grace.
The fella I interviewed for the podcast I did, he owned a company, and he had decided he was going to be the spokesperson for the company in ads for the company. He was going to be the guy that you saw on the screen that talked to you, that told you about these different products. He was going to be the pitchman. He decided, the hell with it. I'm going to do it with my stutter. It was a wondrous thing to behold, him just take the reins like that and decide, well, it's my company. I'm inventing these little things. He was inventing guitar pedals for professional rock musicians and jazz musicians. And he was the guy who talked about them. So I really enjoyed learning more about stuttering from him and also his bold approach to putting himself out there, obliterating this idea that stuttering has gone away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joel Cordy, and I am the owner of Chase Bliss Audio and the designer of Wombtone Mark II. I'm going to try to highlight some of the new stuff that's different than the original Wombtone Mark I. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but it is a phaser pedal, in case you were wondering. This is a really special and rare kind of control when it comes to phasers, in that it can go all the way to dry, which is cool for a lot of different reasons, for bass players specifically. But then it can go all the way wet vibrato. So this is like vibrato circuit, but it's of the phase variety.
There's a disclaimer at this YouTube channel, and it reads as follows. Joel stutters. If this is somehow upsetting or otherwise unpleasant for you, kindly piss off and buy a different pedal.
I remember one time kind of looking in the mirror when I was talking to my parents in another room. And not that I was looking directly at my reflection, but I kind of caught myself in the mirror, and I was really struggling. And I hadn't ever seen how much I was struggling to speak, and it sort of scared me. Because I think, when stuttering starts to manifest when you're young, the person who stutters isn't necessarily aware of it or the severity of it. So I think that for me, I always thought that I was really aware of it and really affected by it. But in that moment, it kind of surprised me to be like, whoa, that's what I look like. And it made me feel really bad. That's one memory that I have. I also have this memory when I was about 6 years old where I was talking to a classmate in my first grade classroom. We were talking about stuttering for some reason, and I was like, yeah, well, my parents told me that it's going to go away. And she said, no, it's never going to go away. And I was like, that scared me too, because I just felt like it was going to go away. And at that time in my life, there was a pretty high likelihood that I would grow out of it, because the population as a whole, 5% of people when they're young stutter, and 75% of that population naturally recover from it, roughly. But for 25% of that 5%, it persists into adulthood. So roughly 1% of the population stutters.
Are you aware of grade school being a kind of nightmare or just an annoyance?
I remember it as a nightmare. My parents are always quick to point out to me that I was actually pretty happy. And sometimes if I see old videos of myself or see something I wrote, I'm like, oh yeah, like I was pretty normal and happy. But I just think that the memories with stuttering are they make such an impact. When I think back to those times, it seems so bad. I mean, I think one thing that helped is I was pretty athletic, so that, sometimes that can just help. Because if you're good at catching a football for some reason, that makes you attractive to other kids. So I had friends and things like that. I feel like I've always had a little bit of social anxiety and just kind of worried about stuff. And I think when I was younger, I thought that if I did not stutter, my life would be easy and I wouldn't have any problems. And now as I've gotten older and I've really, really worked on my stuttering for the last 10 years, where the frequency of stuttering that I have can still be really high, but the struggle associated with it is greatly diminished. And I feel like I'm able to communicate pretty well, actually. I'm just less interested in spending any time on it or thinking about it because I have so much other stuff that I'm interested in. There's days that go by that I don't think about stuttering at all, which seems, if you would have told me that 10 years ago, it just wouldn't even seem in any way a possibility.
And if you had told Joel Cordy he'd be doing endorsement videos and demo videos for a professional company, that he'd be an audio and video spokesman as part of his chosen career, he'd have said, "What are you talking about? Then magically that stuttering must have gone away." No, it didn't. And you're doing the spokesman stuff anyway. How rare is that? Rare enough for USA Today to do a story on Joel. Let's face it, folks, how many corporate videos are you familiar with where a company goes with a stutterer as a spokesman? The idea is absurd. Or is it? What's really absurd? My view is, that's what. My thinking is what's absurd. Are any of you having any trouble at all understanding Joel? He's a thoughtful, articulate, candid, engaging human being. But I would have said, hire a guy to push your product. Probably the worst advice anyone could have given this guy. I'm an idiot, see. He, in fact, is the perfect pitchman. He's passionate about the company and the products. This is his baby, for God's sake. He's a good-looking, charismatic guy with a love for what he's talking about, and the stutter just makes him stand out, and thus his company stand out. It's brilliant. never get another spokesman.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joel Cordy, and I am the owner of Chase Bliss Audio and the designer of Warped Vinyl, which is an analog vibrato / chorus pedal. So we're going to start right here with the ramp knob. This sets the time that you can modulate any of the parameters on here or ramp and hold any of the parameters on here. This is a really cool feature, and it's probably the feature I'm the most proud about on the pedal.
There's this analogy in stuttering therapy that I was really drawn to, where a lot of people who stutter think they're like this giant in chains. Like, if I only didn't stutter, I would have this and this and this and all these things, and I would be so successful. And I remember I was at a support group one time, and I heard this guy talking, and he was about 10 years older than me. You know, there's some people that have like a really debilitating stutter. Sometimes you can look at someone and be like, yeah, you know what? I'm not sure how I would manage it if my stuttering was that severe. But this person I'm referring to wasn't one of those people, but he was talking about if he didn't stutter, he would have a wife and have, you know, this great job, and he would probably have a house. And I just kind of realized that not stuttering isn't a prerequisite for any of those things, right? You know, and it was just sort of crazy that stuttering had defined this person's life to that level.
That's that sense of acceptance and getting to that point. And here he was as an adult, a full-grown adult, and really just coming to the point of true, complete acceptance where he says, hell with it. I'm going to just put myself out there, and I'm going to be an advocate for my company and for the fact that, people are different and we all have our struggles, but here's what I've got to offer you. I think that's to be applauded. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to let you go. I'm so delighted you took this time. I often call people at work because I call during this time, and it's always amazing to me how many people don't say, I can't talk, and hang up. I got lucky that you weren't with a student.
I would have possibly been with a student, but she was absent today, so I wasn't with her. And I was just doing paperwork, and I saw, Minnesota number. So if I see a South Carolina number and it's not in my contacts, I just ignore it. But I answered. And I'm so glad I did.
I'm glad you answered as well. Well, I wish you all the best with this school year and hope to talk to you again sometime.
That'd be lovely. And I'll pick up.
All right. Thanks for spending all this time with me and for your insights.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Accidents. Awkward, painful, embarrassing, often involving things like stairs, dogs, morons, wet floors, drunk people. Most people deal with it and say, well, that's life. What are you going to do? And they go back to staring at cloud formations. Not you. You call Bradshaw and Bryant, my personal injury attorneys. These are the people who read forms and documents for high entertainment. They make paperwork look like a carnival joyride. Seriously, they turn chaos into compensation for you. They will argue, negotiate, scheme on your behalf, but they'll do it with a kind of sly brilliance that makes the other side regret ever being born. They're terribly clever. Bradshaw and Bryant, personal injury attorneys, because suffering quietly is terribly dull and just plain stupid. Learn more at minnesotapersonalinjury.com. You're looking for a residential memory care setup for your parent, for your grandparent, for your spouse. Hey, you could just go down the block, pick the first memory care place you see. It's convenient. But here's the thing. People do that and often regret it. They pull their parents, their spouses, their grandparents out of there, and they bring them to the Wellshire, because the Wellshire isn't just a memory care center. It's 4 distinct households, 4 levels of care tailored to exactly what your loved one needs. And the amenities, you won't find those anywhere else. Beautiful spaces, engaging programs, staff who actually know your loved one well, not just their chart. If you care about convenience, fine, go down the block. But if you care about your family member deeply, about their comfort, their dignity, their joy, Call the Wellshire. Set up a tour. You won't look back. The Wellshire Residential Memory Care Center, Bloomington and Medina. Unmatched care, and for you, unmatched peace of mind. Charlie English is a former journalist for The Guardian, where he held several positions, including head of international news. He's an author, and the book I want to talk to him about is his latest, The CIA Book Club, The Secret Mission to Win the Cold War with Forbidden Literature. This is the first time this story is being widely told. I'm always intrigued when these stories from many years ago only get told widely now. I'm also fascinated by the way authors come upon stories like this, these little jewels that are hidden out there, a story that I had never heard of before, and most people hadn't. Again, the CIA Book Club, it's a provocative title right there. What is the CIA Book Club? I welcome to the show Charlie English. Hello, Charlie.
Hi, Tommy. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. You are in London?
That's right. Yep.
Where you were raised?
No, I'm from the north of England. I was born in York and grew up in East Yorkshire, which is a kind of small rural county in the north of England. But I came down to London when I was 18 to college, and I haven't really left since then.
And was your goal coming down to London to eventually become a journalist?
It was in a way, but I went round quite a long roundabout route. I studied electrical engineering.
That is roundabout.
Quickly realized that wasn't going to be my career. And then when I finished that degree, I traveled to Pakistan and got a job as a journalist out there. And, I always wanted to write. I liked writing, and journalism kind of happened to me, I suppose, from the age of about 21, 22 onwards.
I'm convinced you're the only person I'm ever going to talk to who said, I then traveled to Pakistan and became a journalist. I don't know how that happens, but were they needing one there, or were you writing for some publication in London and focusing on Pakistan?
I was working for a Pakistani newspaper. They have several English language newspapers and English language media outlets. And it's a very exciting, vibrant country to be in. Enormous number of things going on at any one time. And in those days, it was when the Soviet-backed regime was in Afghanistan, and there were lots of mujahideen in the northwest frontier of Pakistan. And I was kind of in the middle of those Afghan refugees, really, and sort of writing some stories about them.
It sounds like what was born there was a love of the international picture, both culturally and politically for you.
I think that's right. Yeah. I mean, I've always tried to take an internationalist perspective. I think when I worked in journalism, I kind of noticed that most of the big media organizations tend to report on certain parts of the world in great depth, but then they leave other parts of the world completely alone. And it seemed to me that was a shame. And so through my books, I suppose I've tried to bring to light stories that are not, as you say, widely known, but from countries also that are not often very well covered by what we might call the Western media.
There are a slew of wondrous surprises in the CIA Book Club. I think the intriguing thing to start with is the way you came upon the story, simply reading an obituary. What happened with that? How did that lead to this?
So I'd written a book about saving some Islamic manuscripts in Timbuktu from Al-Qaeda. So I had this kind of vein, if you like, that I was mining that was about culture in situations of conflict. And I came across this obituary of a guy called Roger Scruton, who some of your listeners may know. He was a sort of conservative British philosopher. And the obituary stated that he used to take copies of banned or censored books into the Eastern Bloc when he traveled there. And he used to encourage his students to do the same. And it seemed to me that if there was a kind of organized aim of smuggling this literature through the Iron Curtain in order to destabilize the regimes of the East. And that was a story worth digging into. And so I looked into it, and I found some evidence of this CIA operation, and I started digging into that.
The idea here with both your book and with the CIA's approach to fighting the Soviets and all that they were presenting in the East Bloc during the Cold War, the idea is that books by themselves are weapons. Books from the West flooding the East Bloc worked as weapons because the ideas presented in the books, even in periodicals, newspapers, magazines, whatever was sent in, and a whole lot was sent in, millions of examples of Western literature in all its forms sent in to the Soviet East Bloc. The idea was keep the people there aware of what they don't have, what's taken from them, and you'll keep alive a spirit of rebellion.
That's right. So in the Eastern Bloc at that time, every country had a very draconian system of censorship, which was based on the mothership, if you like, in Moscow. And the idea was to really control the conversation, the amounts of ideas and the types of ideas that people in those countries could have. So the censor's job was to promote the idea of Marxist, Leninist thinking and to shut down anything that kind of looked like it was an alternative way of life or a better way of life or a freer way of life. So the CIA realized in the aftermath of World War II, when they were trying to combat the propaganda operations of the KGB and trying to spread communism into the West, they realized that there was an opportunity here. It was an attempt really to kind of break the intellectual stultification that the Stalinist system had created in the Eastern Bloc. Yeah, you're right. They sent a huge range of publications from the really high literature, I guess you would call it, books by Orwell or Hannah Arendt or Alexander Solzhenitsyn, through to Cosmopolitan magazine and Marie Claire, these kind of lifestyle fashion magazines. And the aim was to really show that there was a kind of great diversity of thinking and opinion in the West, that people were free to pursue all sorts of different kinds of lifestyles. I mean, if you think in the Eastern Bloc, fashion was kind of frowned upon. So if you pick up a copy of Marie Claire and you see people in all sorts of different, exciting fashions, then that's has a very strong propagandistic effect, if you like. I mean, one person told me that even reading something like Agatha Christie in the Eastern Bloc, you'd be reading about these kind of English country houses and people would have their own cars and they'd be eating nice food and they'd have their own houses. And if you were on a waiting list for your apartment, if you had to queue for your shopping, this showed you that there was another system and it might be working better than the one that you lived in.
So the CIA funds this program of flooding the East Bloc with literature, all sorts of literature, obviously having to smuggle it in. They start this in the 50s. It lasts through the 50s, through the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s. In fact, I believe the guy in charge of it at the beginning in the 50s was still in charge of it in the early 90s.
You're talking about a guy called George Minden, who was working in a kind of anonymous office in Manhattan, something called the Free Europe Committee in the mid-50s. The Free Europe Committee was this psychological, political branch of the CIA. It was a kind of cover organization. It founded the radio stations, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, and so on. So Minden was working for this, and they'd begun the books program, which really grew out of kind of balloon propaganda drops that were happening in the early 50s. And they would drop leaflets in their millions. They'd float these balloons up with these big payloads of leaflets, and they would drift over the Iron Curtain, and then they were designed to puncture at altitude and rain down all this propaganda on the people below. But they realized this wasn't really working very well because people didn't want to keep these leaflets. They had no intrinsic value. But when they began sending books, people wanted to keep the books because the books had some kind of value. And Minden was very much part of those early decisions to turn it from a propaganda operation into more of a literary operation, because he could see the power of literature, and he was a very well-educated intellectual man himself, so he liked the idea of ensuring that the Eastern Bloc wasn't forgotten and that it wasn't kind of separated from the rest of the world in literary terms.
Yeah, and a couple things stand out here. One is the weakness of propaganda itself, of just dropping leaflets of propaganda. There was a sense maybe early on that would have some effect, but it pales in comparison to dropping something like Orwell's 1984 or Animal Farm. I think people are more sophisticated than they're often given credit for. Propaganda is propaganda, no matter who's sending it out. Whereas literature, good literature, the work of independent people just writing about life and living, seems to be trusted more, and rightly so. And the mix of it, the variety of it together, presents a world that would look very attractive to these people, and more importantly, would stress that there are people out there able to live in this wondrous world of ideas and have it affect their life and have it alter their culture and have it change what they pursue. And then there's their world. And I think we forget what the world was like of the Soviet East Bloc after World War II. I think of day-to-day life there. The image in my mind is long lines, shortages, this drab, colorless world, this bureaucratic, intensely frustrating world, and in many ways a lonely world because it's bereft of a bigger, wondrous culture that many of these places had prior to the Soviets.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. The way the books circulated often was that they would be wrapped in pages of the party newspaper, so they would look like communist publications. Then they would be shared widely, so you might have a night to read your copy of 1984, and then you were supposed to pass it on to a friend, and they would pass it on to a friend, and so on and so on. So I start the book with a story of one particular copy of 1984 that arrived in Poland from Paris in 1957. That book was circulating right up until the end of the 80s. So 30 plus years there of this book being continually shared. And, you know, looking at it, you could see that it had been incredibly well read. You know, it had been recovered and it was wrapped in a kind of picture of a 1970s computer room. So it looked like a kind of very boring technical manual. But when you open it up, you see that it's a Polish translation of 1984. So these books were, I think, highly desired among a certain group of people. But then we go through to the 80s, and the CIA at this point are not only smuggling books, they're smuggling printing presses and printing equipment and so on.
The smuggling of printing presses. A book I get, I mean, there are examples of it being tucked in a diaper. I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful ways books are snuck into the country. But the printing press, what was the approach there to getting those into Poland?
I think the first one, if I remember correctly, the first one was smuggled in with a kind of theatrical touring troupe in their kind of equipment. But when they got to smuggling offset presses, which are really quite large machines that can produce maybe 10,000 copies of a publication in a day, these machines, they had to really be carried in trucks. There was a guy in Sweden, actually, who was carrying them in yachts, a sail training yacht or two that would sail along the Polish coast in the Baltic Sea. And sometimes the skippers would cross over the Baltic illegally into southern Sweden, and they would take on board printing presses and offload Polish vodka. So it was like a kind of contraband black market operation. And they'd take on printing presses and books and print materials and sail back to Gdańsk or some port on the North Polish coast and offload this stuff there. Another way they did it was they created a delivery truck. So there were humanitarian supplies going through the Iron Curtain kind of more or less all the time. You know, they were carrying food and medicines and bedding and all this kind of stuff. And a particular group in Paris built a special secret compartment into a delivery truck, and they could stack it in this place, presses and books and so on, and then seal it up. And then they would fill the rest of the truck with humanitarian supplies and so on, and then get a French driver, because a French driver was less likely to get into serious difficulty if they got caught. And the French driver would drive this truck through the Iron Curtain into Poland, deliver the humanitarian relief, and then go and deliver the actual purpose of the trip, which was to meet the dissident group wherever they were and give them the print supplies and so on. The hero, in a sense, of this book is a guy called Mirek Chojecki, and he's an underground printer in late 1970s Poland, and he is caught. And they know that he is an underground publisher. He's responsible for a lot of the material that's hitting the streets of Warsaw. And they lock him up. They don't charge him. They just kind of lock him away. And he is force-fed because he goes on hunger strike. It's not quite torture, but it's something not far away from that. And many of the dissident publishers were facing really significant jail terms for their activities.
Chojecki gets jumped and beaten. They just appear in the middle of the night. They always make sure it's the middle of the night, and they just take him from his home. Then maybe a couple weeks later, they'd get him again. Just kept doing this. I mean, they just really wanted to mess with his life enough to get him to get out of this whole business of publishing these banned, censored materials. These Poles clearly must have been aware, and I'm speaking now of the citizenry, of the power of this stuff, to risk what they risked. I mean, they knew the Soviets weren't messing around. They knew how many people, after the Soviets took over Poland, they knew how many people disappeared, how many people were killed, how many people were sent to Siberia. They were playing with fire, all to read a book, to read a magazine, to read some story late at night in this beat up thing copied from somewhere that was copied from somewhere. They must have known they were working with the equivalent of weapons.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chojecki in particular was the son of Polish war heroes. His parents fought in the Polish resistance. They were in the Warsaw Uprising against the Nazis, risked their lives more or less daily. The dangers they faced in Nazi-occupied Warsaw were absolutely horrific. I mean, there were death squads roaming the streets, just shooting people at random, it seems. And then the Nazis were pulled out of Warsaw and the Soviets moved in instead, and Poland really swapped one kind of totalitarian nightmare for another. And so Mirek Chojecki, when he was growing up, you could say resistance was kind of the family business. But he was very conscious that he wasn't going to win this war with guns. You know, he wasn't going to use the same techniques that his parents had had to use against the occupier. And I think there was a widespread understanding within the Polish opposition that military resistance of any kind was just not going to work. So the way to do it was through persuading people and sort of keeping alive the idea of an independent Poland, keeping their independence and their kind of identity alive. And there's a great quote from Chojecki, which he told me once. He was sitting talking to his father, the war hero, and his father said, "Mirek, do you think with your little books you're going to be able to defeat Soviet communism?" And Mirek replied, "What would you rather I do? Shoot somebody?" You know, there's a sort of generational difference. I mean, they're both fighting for the same cause, but there is a sort of generational difference in the idea of how best to serve that cause. But as you say, the books really were more effective weapons at that point than actual guns would have been.
Hey, you feeling confused about your investments? Your 401k giving you nightmares, is it? Your IRA secretly plotting against you? Relax, Josh Arnold is here. He's been saving people from financial chaos for over 4 decades, and he enjoys it. He's really, really good. Josh knows the market inside and out. From mutual funds to retirement plans, he's offering you a free 48-minute consultation. You call him up, 48 minutes of solid advice. No jargon, no pressure, just real talk about your money. 952-925-5608. You call Josh Arnold because your money deserves someone smarter than Google and funnier than your cousin Larry. 952-925-5608.
Investment services offered by Josh Arnold Investment Consultant, LLC, a security and investment advisor. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investments involve risk. Tommy MISCHKE is a paid endorser.
I want you folks to know that American Pressure goes around quietly helping others in their community, and you don't know about it because they'll never tell you about it. But you people in the pressure washing world who need pressure washers, either new ones or your pressure washer repaired, you should know about this. When you deal with the folks at American Pressure, you're dealing with people with good hearts. Just for example, there are 3 different Lions groups that American Pressure donates to. American Pressure gives them Arctic steamers for steaming sweet corn for various benefits. Maple Grove Lions Club gets 4 of their steamers. They go through about 600 dozen ears of corn during their Maple Grove days. New Hope Lions Club gets 3 steamers. The Howard Lake Lions Club not only gets a steamer, they get a volunteer from American Pressure for their Music in the Park event. American Pressure has been donating equipment since they started years ago. Good people are who you want to do business with, you people who need pressure washers. Deal with good people. You'll never be sorry. American Pressure of Robbinsdale. Was Hayetsky the gentleman referred to by some people? Did I read this in your book? Was he referred to as almost Christ-like?
Yes, his bravery, I think, is really remarkable in that period, in the late 70s, when he was an underground publisher. The regime would send gangs of thugs to beat the hell out of him, you know. They would wait outside his house. They would try and turn all his friends into informants. I mean, the levels of harassment that people suffered by the state secret police in those days was really quite extraordinary. I mean, death threats all the time, calling the house and threatening their kids, you know, their families. I think you had to be psychologically very robust, very strong to be able to do the kinds of things that Hayetsky did.
You know, I think about that often. I think about what these people sacrifice, and I think, yeah, you have to be tough and you have to be driven and principled and determined. But I sometimes wonder if I just failed to get a grasp of what the alternative was, the life they would have faced if they didn't fight, the despondency, the boredom, the sense of, is this it? Is my run on this earth going to be in this world, in this system? Am I just going to find the occasional nice sunrise to cheer me up, or maybe having some fun with my kid? And I often think maybe that's what many reasonable people said is, this is the system we're stuck with. I don't want to die. I don't want my family's life to be a brutalized life. I'm going to make the best of it, keep my head down.
I think that's true. I think most people made that decision, made that call. I think you had to be psychologically strong. They had a whole series of kind of mechanisms for keeping this sense of Polish identity alive through occupation. For instance, flying universities. When the state controlled the actual universities and decreed what could be taught in those places, professors and academics would gather with students in people's apartments and give lectures that were kind of off the curriculum, if you like, on subjects that were not permitted by the state. And this extended in the 70s and 80s into flying libraries. So the flying universities needed course material, they needed books, and this enabled the growth of flying libraries, which were collections of books that were continually circulating. They were often supported by the CIA book program, so many of the publishers who sent their books to Poland were being supported by the CIA. So you had these collections of books that were in continuous circulation. The idea of the flying in the flying library is that they don't touch the ground long enough for the secret police to be able to work out where they are and then confiscate the whole lot.
Some people might say the reason the story of this CIA program to flood the East Bloc with books, perhaps the reason the story hasn't been widely disseminated is because that isn't really what ended up aiding the cause, resulting ultimately in the dismantling of the great empire of the Soviet Union. But I think what really should be stated, and it probably should have been stated earlier, is reading the CIA book club, I learned that, well, you mentioned this dissident earlier, this Adam MISCHKE. I learned that he said after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we should build a monument to books, because I'm convinced it was books that were victorious in this fight. A book is like a reservoir of freedom, of independent thought, a reservoir of human dignity. A book was like fresh air. They allowed us to survive and not go mad. That last line could make a man shiver. I don't think we realize here the power of a book. It allowed us to survive and not go mad. I mean, there is no way to ultimately measure it, but one thing we do know is that a lot of these people who were involved in the Solidarity movement in the late 80s, the Lenin shipyards in Gdansk in Poland, a lot of them were raised on these smuggled books.
Most of the leaders of Solidarity that I encountered or researched during this story had grown up on this literature or had been involved in the underground press in some way. So they were almost all involved in the kind of uncensored movement of ideas around Poland. A book is a phenomenally good way of carrying a fairly complex argument about an idea. But it wasn't only the ideas the books contained, it was also the sense that these books gathered groups of like-minded people together. So it kind of joined these groups of people into groups of activists. And so a lot of the people who were instrumental in the collapse of communism in 1989 were the same people who were raised on these books.
I want to bring it to where we are today to some degree. We learn in your book, the CIA Book Club, that people were astounded by Orwell's insight. When they read 1984 and Animal Farm, they just read it and said, how the hell did this guy know? He wrote this in the 40s. How did he know that this is what we'd be dealing with? He never experienced this, and he just had such great insight. There was a sense that with his books particularly, there was a real power there, a real awakening that would happen when these people would read Orwell. And I think of today, I'm living in a country where in Iowa, the schools have attempted to ban Orwell's books from their school libraries. These are the books that were fighting the Cold War. These are the books that told the story we wanted told out there in the world. And now we're at a point where they're wanting to ban them. They should be building monuments to these books. This is one of our great heroes, Orwell. It's just very disturbing to me. I also think of the fact that right now we live in a time where our president has been trying to shut down Radio Free Europe. Again, a powerful tool for getting messages out about another way of living, getting ideas out that over time, drip, 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 clearly appear to be helpful. It's a strange time we're in, and I don't know what the hell all is going on out there. I can't claim to really understand what is afoot, but I think that's another reason your book is very powerful right now. Reading your book and reading the power of these words, and then worrying about us removing words. When I closed your book cover, it's what I was left thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's baffling to me how anyone can think in the West of banning Orwell's books. He's absolutely front and center of our ideas about free speech and liberty and all those kinds of things. And America prides itself in being a bastion of free speech. So it is beyond horrifying that these books are being banned, or at least people are attempting to ban them. And it makes you wonder what political direction the country is heading in.
It's very worrisome. So it was a very worthwhile endeavor on your part on multiple fronts. The CIA Book Club is the title. The Secret Mission to Win the Cold War with Forbidden Literature. Charlie English is the author, and he has been my guest. Thanks for spending all this time with me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed visiting with you.
Thank you, Tommy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Last Saturday, Sarah was feeling kind of tired and a little down. Her weekends had become boring. So she wandered over to EcoFun Motorsports. MISCHKE had been harping on their e-bike sale, and she wanted to check it out. Then she saw it. Sleek, smooth, waiting right there. The salesman gave her a grin and said, hop on it, give it a try right here in the lot. Try it out. One pedal, and she said, okay, I like this. She bought it, and suddenly her city felt different. The wind in her face, the effortless glide up the hills that she always dreaded. She laughed. A 15-minute ride turned into a 2-hour adventure for her. She returned home with her new e-bike, heart pumping, cheeks warm, thinking to herself, why the heck did I wait as long as I did? Be like Sarah. Feel the breeze. Skip the traffic. Reclaim your time. That's what an e-bike does at EcoFun Motorsports. Doesn't just transport you, it wakes you up. Makes the world bigger, easier, fun again. So go to EcoFun Motorsports. Try it. They're having an e-bike sale. You'll remember how moving used to feel like living. One day soon, you are going to need a plumber, and I'm going to want you to call MSP, and you're going to say, why should I do it? MISCHKE said so? That's a stupid reason. It may well be. But would I really be spending this time telling you to go somewhere that was second-rate? I've never done an ad for a second-rate operation in my life. I don't believe in it. I've turned down more ads than I've ever accepted. From leaky faucets to complete pipe replacements, MSP has the best plumbers in Minnesota to handle all your plumbing needs with absolute precision. Drain cleaning, pipe repair and replacement, garbage disposals, tank water heater repair, tank water heater installation. They have an elite skill level, truly an elite skill level. And above that, they don't charge like they're greedy. They're not the cheapest you'll ever call, and they're not the most expensive, but they are the best. MSP, Plumbing, Heating, and Air. Tell them MISCHKE bossed you around and made you call them. I'm kind of itching to call a listener. Let's go to the listener list. The list of folks who don't mind me giving them a ring. Hey, if you want to be on that list, you just text me, huh? 651-321-8949. 651-321-8949. You just text and say, put me on the list, MISCHKE. Give me your first name. Boom, we're set. I'll add you to the list. Who should we call? Let's just randomly grab a name, see what happens here. Listener time, calling another listener of mine.
Hi, I'm a Google virtual calling assistant recording this call for the person you're trying to reach. Can you say what you're calling about?
Yeah, can you tell me the airspeed of an Egyptian sparrow in the springtime when he's heading into a 30-knot wind and the fancy in his heart has turned to love because it's mating season?
Great. I'll share this information with the person you're trying to reach. Thanks for calling.
Listener time, calling another listener of mine.
Hello?
Cameron!
MISCHKE!
Where the hell are you?
I'm down in Texas.
Texas?
Yeah. Living in Alvin, working in Galveston. My wife and I have 2 boys that are just starting up school down here.
Alvin, Texas. What would that town be like? I'm imagining it right now. All I'm picturing right now is an oil well and sweat.
There's a lot of sweat. There is some oil industry in the area, that's for sure. We got a oil line that runs not too far away from the house.
Are you boys going to grow up thinking Texas is the most important place in the world and the coolest place that ever existed and better than everything else and nothing competes with Texas or a Texan?
Probably not. We've moved around quite a bit since they've been born. We've lived in Michigan, Wisconsin. We just moved down here from Alaska.
What's with this peripatetic existence of yours? I don't understand.
I'm in the Coast Guard, so we get moved around quite a bit.
So you have been sent to this place in Texas to work off the shores of Galveston.
Correct, yeah.
And what do you do in the water outside of Galveston? Fish?
No, we don't get to fish too much. I'm on a construction tender. We maintain all the aids navigation along all the ship channels down here.
I've often thought the Coast Guard would be the branch of the military I would most enjoy.
Well, I've definitely enjoyed it. I've been in for 19 years now.
What's the most exciting, enjoyable part of being in the Coast Guard?
Part of it's been being able to go live in all different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the Coast Guard is set up, you get to try a little bit of everything. I've done everything from search and rescue. I did ice breaking on the Great Lakes. I've done construction tending down here in Texas now. I worked on navigational aids on the Snake and Columbia River in eastern Washington. So it's been really neat to see the whole country and do different jobs.
Does that job pay very well?
We're comfortable, you know. You're not going to get rich doing this job, that's for sure.
Wouldn't that be a great ad if they could put that on television? Get rich! Join the Coast Guard! Here's Warren Buffett. Warren? Hi, I'm Warren Buffett. I made my money in the Coast Guard. This traveling from city to city, isn't that hard on the kids?
It's starting to. Yeah, it was a lot easier when they were younger, but now that we've got our oldest is in 7th grade and our youngest is in 3rd grade, and it gets harder when they're leaving friends all the time.
There was a kid in my neighborhood when I was growing up. His dad was in the military. He was bouncing from town to town to town to town. First day he showed up in town, crossed the alley. He marched right out of his back door, across the alley, right to my door, knocked on it, and gave me a silver dollar if I would be his friend. There was no time for messing around. Whatever time you normally take to make a friend, we were going to bypass that. He was going to buy one. I took the money. I'm not going to lie to you. Silver dollar, that talked. He was a decent enough kid, and a year later when he headed out, I thought of giving him his money back, but I had spent it on baseball cards. He understood, and in the meantime, we did have some fun, and I tried to be as good a friend as I could before he headed out to Annapolis. So I'm curious, in your particular case, is there a place you could potentially be sent to next that you'd really look forward to? As in, boy, would that be a taste of heaven.
Coming back up to the Great Lakes would be ideal for us.
Back to the Great Lakes. Just saying Great Lakes gives me goosebumps. Just to be out on those inland seas. Man, oh man.
It was great. And we've actually got a home that we bought when we were stationed in Wisconsin that we're looking to move back to once I'm done moving us around.
How old are you?
38.
How much longer you think you can do this?
1 or 2 more tours, and tours are usually 3 to 4 years, depending on the job.
You know, when I was a kid, the Vietnam War was going on, and a lot of the older guys, my older brother's age, including my older brothers, they were talking about joining the Coast Guard as the best thing to do to avoid having to be shooting at someone in Vietnam. And I knew a few guys who joined the Coast Guard then, and I often wondered how much of a break they got in terms of boot camp or whatever that would be called. I mean, was there ever some drill sergeant type guy yelling in your ear that you're a maggot?
Absolutely, yeah. When I went through, it was at the time considered the second hardest boot camp after the Marine Corps.
Get
so we
the
had,
hell out of here!
we called them company commanders, and they wore the Smokey Bear hats, and they would stand there and just yell directly in your face.
Did you remind them that you were in the Coast Guard? I thought you were going to say that they make you go on the treadmill for 15 minutes every day, and then you can take a break and read.
No, it was full-on boot camp.
Did someone remind these guys we're supposed to be just hanging out in the United States around a bunch of water?
Coast Guard's been involved with every major American war and conflict since 1790.
Well, where the hell have I been? You mean to tell me the Coast Guard was fighting the Nazis?
Yep, most of the guys who drove in the landing craft on D-Day were Coast Guardsmen.
You mean to tell me the Army didn't have people who could drive a boat? You know how to drive this thing, Don? Hell no. Bobby, you know how to drive this? I don't know how to drive it. Somebody call the Coast Guard. Well, this is kind of an ad for the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard people listening are probably thinking, we're going to get some guys off MISCHKE's show alone. Young guys, there's apparently a meaning crisis out there. I've heard about this, read about it. A lot of guys, young guys, are lost. They don't understand their purpose. Maybe the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you all the best. I've enjoyed visiting with you. Thanks again for your time. I'll let you go. You be well.
You too, MISCHKE.
So long.